today is Kelly Vandever. Kelly is the presentation skills expert with the technology twist. With 9 years of studying the art and science of presentations and 13 years of technology industry experience, Kelly is on the leading edge of how business presentations must transform to meet the needs of tech-savvy audiences. As a speaker, trainer, and consultant, Kelly works with business owners, organizational leaders, and sales staffs who want to grow their businesses through presentations. Kelly has delivered speeches or training to AT&T, Verizon Wireless, Alltel, Computer Troubleshooters Global, and many more. Kelly, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Kelly, you say that you're the presentation skills expert with the technology twist. Tell us about that.
Well, obviously, people have been speaking in public and doing presentation skills for eons, back to Aristotle. And for the most part, all of those things that we've learned along the way still apply to human communications today. But what has changed recently is the ability of the audience to interact more with the presenter. A couple of years ago, people started using Twitter and tweeting while people were speaking on stage. And that changes things up a bit for the speaker. It's not enough to be the sage on stage anymore. You have to interact, you have to engage with your audience. And so in addition to helping my clients with their presentation skills for their business reasons, I also help them with the technology issues.
Now, you say you help people to grow their businesses through presentations. Tell me how it is that you help them do that.
Well, there's a couple of ways. Some businesses have a model that they will do demonstrations for their prospects. So in that kind of capacity, I can help coach them on the best ways to address their prospects. And mostly that has to do with how they start the approach. It's part of a longer sales cycle, of course, but when you get to the point where you're presenting to the prospect, you really need to be talking about them. It needs to be all about them and their needs and how what you do as a business benefits them. But what happens is a lot of organizations do it like they've always done it in the past, which is here's who we are and here's why we're wonderful and blah, 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 blah. The prospect doesn't care about any of that. They want to know what you can do for them. And then the other way I help businesses is by doing presentations to other audiences that might be full of their prospects. So for instance, if you're speaking to a chamber event or professional association or at an industry conference, there's things that you bring with your business to the table that you can help people regardless of whether or not they're a client. Now, some businesses are apprehensive about doing that. We can't give away all of our secrets because then they won't hire us. But what I help them understand is they can speed the sales process along by doing these kinds of presentations. As you watch a speaker, you feel like you're getting to know them. And as you get to know them, you get to like them and see how they interact and see how they think. And then that helps you develop that trust in that speaker.
Kelly, what do you think is the 3 biggest mistakes that presenters make, business presenters in particular make, when they're trying to reach an audience?
One of the pieces of advice that I give my clients is just start. Whether it's with a story or a startling remark, something to grab the attention. Resist the urge to go blah, blah, blah. Thank you for coming. Just start your presentation, and people will automatically sit up and go, oh, that was different. What's going on? I've got to pay attention right away because they're not just blithering on. They are providing some value right away. And then another thing a big mistake that I think presenters are apprehensive to do, particularly leaders, is to not include personal stories. We want to get to know you as a speaker. And if you just tell the same story that you read out of the Chicken Soup for the Soul book or that we saw on the internet from one of our buddies, then you're not really telling us who you are as a person. By listening to you tell those personal stories, we understand better who you are and what you value and what you would be like to work with. Well, one problem that business presenters often fall into is, again, going back to that, doing the things that we've always seen other people do, is doing a set of PowerPoint slides that is bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. And much has been written about how that is dull and boring. There's a temptation to read what's on the slides, and that's not a way to engage an audience. Instead, lay out your presentation decide what it is that you need to say and what will help your audience, and then go back and say, okay, now what is this like? And pick pictures using photographs that fill the entire slide screen and minimalistic words. So it might be 1 or 2 words that express whatever that concept is. What happens when you do that is you engage a different part of the listener's brain. The listener can take in a picture much more quickly than they could words.
Kelly, you served for 11 years in the Navy.
I did.
You achieved the rank of lieutenant commander. How do you think your career in the Navy prepared you for the business that you have today?
I learned so much in the military. I learned about discipline. I learned about hard work. I learned about integrity. And those were things that I had grown up knowing, but because the military was my first job out of college, that's where the rubber hits the road. When you leave home and you're working for somebody else or representing the American people, if you will, that's when you really have to learn what it is that you believe in and how that will manifest itself in the workplace. So I believe that one of the ways that my military background has helped me is that it helped me understand who I was as a person. And there were challenging times in the military where I did question myself and did I know what I was doing, and because I have overcome those obstacles that came in the way, it gives me a little more confidence.
What do you think is the thing that really prevents business presenters from getting better than they are?
They're busy. They have their work. They don't have the time to devote to studying what other speakers are doing. They have responsibilities and they need to get things done. And I can help them shortcut the process and learn what they need to learn to be impactful right away.
Now, your business is Communications for Everyone.
Correct.
And it's a relatively new business compared to some of the guests I've had on the program.
Sure.
And how many years have you been in business?
Just about 3 years.
3 years.
Mm-hmm.
What advice could you give to our viewers about lessons that you've already learned about starting in business and having staying power? I mean, some people don't make it even to 3 years.
One of the early pieces of advice I got was to go hang out with people who are doing what you're doing. So I wasn't hanging out with, I was an IT manager. I wasn't hanging out with trainers. I wasn't hanging out with professional speakers. So I knew I needed to learn from them. And I think that was great advice, and I have learned tremendous. It has really helped me speed along the process of my business, learning from all these other people. But then the other thing that I learned myself is that you will get great advice from myriads of people, and often they will contradict each other entirely. So at some point you have to sit back and relax a little bit and say, what's me? What advice fits who I am as a person, the kind of business I want to have, and sift through the different pieces of advice and learn what's going to work for you. And then the hard thing, try it. And be willing to make mistakes and be willing to say, well, that didn't work. Let me try another piece of advice, and just keep experimenting. If you are like me and you want to get everything perfect and right the first time, every time, get over it, because you will make mistakes, you will learn from them, and it'll take infinitely longer than you think it's going to take, but it can happen and eventually will happen for you.
Kelly, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Diane.
Thank you. We've been talking with the owner of Communications for Everyone, Kelly Vandever. I'm your host, Diane Bogino. Until next time on Business Notes.